that's a stirring song I seem to remember from Yip.
Yes, it brings back fond memories. One of the most popular marching songs, one of the most popular songs to which you'll put eternal lyrics.
Isn't that a marvellous sight along Elizabeth Street? Those beautiful old buildings there to camera left, and Hyde Park is on our right, flanked by crowds.
As I'm unable to pick, it could be the marching koalas. I'm not sure about that. But we'll try and get another idea when they come round for their second time, and they should be.
Oh, dispatch riders.
And here we go, the 2nd 33rd Battalion. As again you can see, it's the battle honours in the Middle East, the 7th Division.
Bert Jourdain is the leader today, John.
And also, unfortunately, Delta Company in New Guinea had the unfortunate B-20, when Delta Company was being assembled at the side of an airfield, a fully loaded American B-24 Liberator bomber crashed in its ranks, killing 60 men and wounding 92, and virtually wiped out the entire company. And, of course, the crew of the bomber. Now we have the Donners, those daring young men on their motorcycles. Again, it's part of the SIGs who go and provide communication, either by message, by radio, or by hard copy. We have the Pioneer Battalions, which are engineers, engineer trained and infantry trained. Some of the hardest workers you'll find. Again, if you see the battle honours in Tobruk, Borneo.
And really the forerunners of the combat engineers now, in many ways.
I think it's just been changed. The 7th Division Ammunition Subpark. Again, this is just where you held all your various types of ammunition, which were taken forward to the guns or to the troops by the Royal Australian Army Service Corps.
Just as an observation, the marchers are moving now quite quickly through the numbers in each individual unit, irrespective of the fact that the family and descendants are there as well, moving. Their numbers are down significantly.
Now we have the 6th Australian Machine Gun Battalion. These would have 50 calibre machine guns, which are very efficient over long distances.
And Bob, they were a central corps or brigade allocation, weren't they? And then allocated to individual battalions as required. Now, looking at that, I would suspect that is the band of...
I think it might be, did I see Waverley a moment ago?
Yeah, Waverley there. They've got the right colours there for Waverley College. I'm trying to pick up the number. I've not seen them in that particular uniform. My immediate thought was the school up on the... There we are, number 66. And that is...
It's Waverley on the banner, John.
Waverley College. Now, this is of particular interest because this was the cadet corps to which our current General, Governor-General belonged when he was a schoolboy. And I recall a march not too long ago when past members of the unit were invited to march with their cadet corps. And His Excellency the Governor-General actually marched with the Waverley Cadet Unit. It was a great sight, and I think a great honour for the boys. But it's good to see them well turned out. Normally I remember the Waverley Cadet Unit in standard cadet uniform, the can't see me suits, the camouflage. But today they're nicely turned out, all white, blue and gold of their school colours, well featured there. But we get a nice view down Elizabeth Street.
And we can see that there are 3-4 rows deep in the crowds on both sides there of Elizabeth Street. This is the second year the march has been held in Elizabeth Street. The traditional route of George Street can't be used presently because of the light rail construction project underway. So what you're looking at in this beautiful shot here is Elizabeth Street with the old historic buildings on one side, Hyde Park on the other, and of course the crowds paying respects on both sides and saying thank you to those marching, which number in their thousands, John?
Oh yes, I waiting to hear the first estimate of the support along the side of the road there. Many thousands indeed.
Now we come to the 8th Division, the unlucky 8th, who were sent, or 2 of the brigades were sent to Malaya, and there they fought the Japanese valiantly until they were overrun and then forced to go into captivity. Of course, from there, a lot of them were sent to Borneo, to Burma, or to Burma Railway, or to Japan itself to work in the mines, and we took terrible casualties there. I had an uncle in the 18th, 2nd 18th Battalion who spent the war in Changi. Here we had some of the units, the 2nd 12th Field Company, Division Signals. There would be very few men there left from the 8th Division, from the privations that they were forced to endure. The only brigade, in fact, it wasn't sent there, were split up to 3 different places, sent to Timor, Ambon and Rabaul, where unfortunately they were all overrun by the Japanese and in a lot of cases massacred.
And of course the men who were that survived the massacre at the Toll campaign in Rabaul, most of them were lost on the Montevado Maru when it was sunk in July 1942. Over 1,000 Australians in one sinking.
Well, it's the greatest maritime disaster for Australia.
Particularly as the ship was sunk by our allies. Most unfortunate, but those things happen in war. Bob, you spoke about the split up of the battalion to 3 individual spots. A political decision, not based on any military strategy whatsoever, but the government of the day had a political obligation. They did it, and our troops paid.
Very similar to the men who come home from the Middle East who were dumped in Java without Weary Dunlop and his medical staff and the machine gun battalions. Didn't even have their weapons, yet they were landed with no weapons as a political gesture.
A bit like sending the 6th Division over to Greece. It's a political decision to send them over there.
There's an old chap.
Trying to identify the band just passed. They sound very good. Small in numbers, look like all young ladies, well turned out. Maybe one of our schools, I don't know.
There we have the 9th Division. You can tell they battled the big T, which stood for Brook, forward for Brook. So the 9th Division is coming in, the magnificent 9th. Again, they're led by the gunners from the 2nd 4th Light Anti-Aircraft. Again, you can see where they fought everywhere, Palestine, El Alamein, Finchhaven. Again, they would have had been issued with BOFAs, with a 40mm anti-aircraft gun. A field company, an engineer, Royal Australian Engineer Field Company. Seem to be a bit mixed up. We have the gunners and the engineers all mixed up together. The 2nd 17th Light Anti-Aircraft, obviously airborne, as they said there. So must have been break them down and put them into the Dakotas.
Bob, we often have a bit of trouble getting some information from the 9 Div units at the moment, so if there is anyone from 9 Div out there who can feed us information for future marches here in Sydney, please contact us. We'd appreciate the advice.
I wonder what the magpie is for.
I'd say it's their unit symbol, but I'm not sure of the derivation nor the history.
No, it's...
nor the significance. The crowd, very hard. Looking up St James Station in the background there, looking back onto Hyde Park. Very well attended. Again,
the T on the banner coming through, standing for Tobruk, which is the 9th Division. It's an anti-tank. In fact, they were very important in Tobruk because the Germans attacked with tanks and infantry. The order was let the tanks through. The infantry were in their foxholes are told sit on the bottom, let the tanks go over the top of you. Once they've gone through, you get up and you stop the infantry following them. The tanks then went to an anti-tank positions behind where they were destroyed there.
And that was the secret of success, splitting the infantry and the armour, and it worked until the Australians left.
Yes, up to that stage, normally when the tanks got through, they withdrew the infantry straight away. But this stage, the infantry stayed and fought. The infantry following through the tanks. Again, we have the battalions of the 20th Brigade coming through, 2nd, 13th, 15th, 17th.
blue coats there, the blue and white of the Castle Hill RSL Youth Wind Orchestra. Now they're regular participants here at the march, very spectacular, strongly supported by the local RSL club, and it's good to see them. They look good, they sound good.
Very colourful. John, I still haven't seen a glockenspiel.
Robert, you are been waiting. I think you've seen one in the past 5 or 6 years, haven't you?
Yes, I've
one
waited.
only.
One only. I'm still waiting. I hold my breath in anticipation.
And I don't think our drum major is there waving to the crowd. I think he's conducting while the band is pedalling there on the spot, unfortunately.
It's the ultimate in multi-skilling, John, no doubt about it.
There we are. On we go, chaps. Let's advance. Well done.
That was a nice way of starting him off, wasn't it?
Yeah.
None of us yelling and screaming at them. Just wave the hand forward. We'll take off.
He can twirl that baton.
Yes.
I have seen many a drum major come to grief.
Yes.
Trying to be a
too
bit
good.
enthusiastic with the bass.
Here another machine gun battalion, again armed with the 50s, which are a very devastating weapon over a long range.
Shades of Dad's Army.
Oh, it is a Dad's
Great
Army.
theme song there. A good choice for a march on occasion such as this. And there we have a magnificent job, looking right down Elizabeth Street there, and we can see the Castle Hill marching band there at the front in their blue and white. Well supported crowd, supporting, waving flag to each flank, and the march trending back into the distance.
Now we have the militia battalion. Look at this.
Yeah, 36 militia.
36 militia battalion again, which would have been sent to New Guinea. Originally, militia battalions were not supposed to be sent out of Australia. They were all raised for service within Australia, and the AIF were raised to be sent overseas, but they extended the definition slightly so they could send them up to New Guinea.
Bob, a word of explanation. The militia were later the CMF, and then now the Army Reserve. Volunteers.
And of course, many of the young men landed in Moresby just after the outbreak of war and actually never fired their weapons when they were sent there.
Some of them didn't even have uniforms, Tony.
And they took, when they were accused of a bit of cowardice, they took quite pride in the fact they were the mice of Moresby rather than the rats of Tobruk.
It was a stain on the Australian Army the way they were actually. Some of them were sent to New Guinea without leave, and their descendants didn't know they were even out of the country. They were just shanghaied, put on a ship and sent up there, where they did virtually menial tasks until the Japanese come over to the top, and they had to go and fight them. As you said, some of them never fired a rifle.
And they had the derogatory term being chocolate soldiers, but they proved they didn't melt in the sun.
Yeah. And they had the 23rd Pioneer Battalion again. Second, third, that would be an AIF. So
there we have the Marching Koalas, and very well. I did call another band some time ago as the Marching Koalas, obviously in error, but here is the real Marching Koalas. Don't they look great?
You can't miss that, John.
And of course,
cannot miss.
The second, third that just went out of shot were Jack Mackay VC's battalion, one of the last VCs in the war at Tarakan.
Now, it's interesting, unfortunately, some of the reputation for those young militia men in New Guinea came from the subject you broached a little earlier, Tony, and that is the publicity policy by General MacArthur, which favoured General MacArthur and no one else, unfortunately.
We're back to the 9th Division again, the 2nd 28th Battalion. Again, you can see the various places it fought in.
And of course, the very last VC in the war was a militia soldier, the only Frank Partridge VC, later a Quid Star on Pickerbox.
Pickerbox man, yes.
Second, 4th Battalion.
And he got the VC, it was the only militiaman to get a VC at the age of 19. I think he was the youngest VC of the Second World War for an Australian as well.
Now we've got headquarters to Australian Corps. All all the divisions would have a headquarters above them, and this was the headquarters of 2 Australian Corps, and the Corps consisted of the 6th and 7th divisions to start off with. And behind them we have the divisional attached troops, which obviously fought in Bougainville in the islands.
Well, it features very well there on their battle honours, and a lot of battle honours on the next one, the 5th. 5th
Infantry Division, again a militia division which was sent up to fight in northern parts of New Guinea, at Lae, and to release the AIF to go to Balikpapan and places north. The 4th Australian Battalion, AIF, that's an unusual one. Normally it was the 4th Battalion Association, because it was AIF would be 2nd 4th. Or it's the 1st, or it's the 4th Battalion from the First World War.
We shall toss a coin, Roberts,
yes,
and find out.
White over green was the colours for the 4th Battalion Association, because that was the colours on the 4th Battalion and the 2nd 4th. Plus the 4th Battalion of the Royal New South Wales Regiment.
I've always found it a little strange, the numbering system adopted for our battalions in World War II compared to what we had in World War I, but a decision at the time.
Here we have the 31st, 51st Infantry Battalion OAF. These are part of the units which were sent up to New Guinea with virtually no training, no equipment. As I got out of the trucks that took them up the Imita Ridge, they were issued with Owen guns and Bren guns, which had never seen before in their life, given a half-hour lesson on how they were fired, and sent off to fight the Japanese army, which had routed every other army it had come up against in the war to date. It was a dreadful thing to do to us. And the worst part was that they knew 2 months before it happened that the Japanese were going to do it. And they didn't send the AIF divisions, which we were training in Australia. Milne Bay Force, 1942. We spoke about it before. The magnificent fight there with the militia brigade, AIF brigade, and the 2 squadrons of the RAAF. The first time the Japanese did not have air superiority or air parity.
Well, they tried, but the weather was against them, and our guys were better pilots.
And we're fortunate too, the Australian commander developed a superb deception plan and managed to fool the invading Japanese forces as the strength of the Australians on the ground. This was a well done bit of planning.
And it was a terrible. The Milne Bay itself apparently was a terrible place. It's malaria-ridden. It's mud. The aircraft were actually flying off planks, aluminium planks.
Yeah, pierced steel planking, PSP it was called, or Marsden matting. So it allowed the aircraft to land on the muddy. The airfield had only been made 6 weeks.
Now, just mentioning
Here's
this
the Air
band
Force
before
coming
they
through
moved,
now, John.
this is the band of the King School. They at Newington College vie for the who's the oldest cadet corps, but they're leading the RAAF, and that's John Cornish.
Okay, so here we have the banners of the Australian Flying Corps and the RAF Association. More than 3,000 Australians served overseas in 4 squadrons formed in 1916 during World War I, and they were very effective. In fact, that was the battle where some of our pilots were involved with the Red Baron.
Elderly member of the WAF there, John?
Yes. Now we have the World War II veterans in some of their wheelchairs there. And we have the fighting squadrons. They're moving very quickly through here, John.
I can see 31 Squadron bow fighters there, John, and 30 Squadron.
Number 30 Squadron, yes. There was, they were a low-level attack squadron equipped with bow fighters. They were nicknamed the Whispering Death by the Japanese because of their speed and the quietness of their engines. The squadron played a huge role in the Battle of the Bismarck Sea, where an entire Japanese convoy was destroyed from the air. It was a major blow to the Japanese. And there we have 31 Squadron bow fighters. Marching today, Mr. Ron Leckie. And we believe he turns 94 today. There he is on screen now.
And in fact, he is the reviewing officer for the Newington College Anzac Cadet Parade on Thursday this week.
John.
It's great to see. It's great to see. Really
An old boy, I take it, John.
He is indeed.
Beautiful portraits of the veterans. So
yes.
to see the faces, to personify what this day is all about. It really does add to the occasion.
Well, while they're small in numbers, they did a great job during their day. So now we move on to 93 Squadron Bow Fighters. That was called the Green Ghost. The banner depicts the green-coloured ghost holding the Shanghai and riding a rocket with the words "Spookus Sneakiness." Equipped with the Australian-built bow fighter, which was the best bow fighter. The squadron was formed in 1945 and took part in the Borneo campaign. Now we've moved on now to the bomber squadrons, and now the famous bomber squadrons that flew a variety of aircraft, including Bostons, Wirraways, Hudsons, the Wellington twin-engine bomber, and the famous Lancaster. Also, now we're looking at the banner of 2 Squadron. But John, talk to the band now, mate.
Yeah, that's the band of the Castle Hill RSL Pipes and Drums. We had their RSL Youth Band a moment ago in those lovely blue and white uniforms. Here is the other thing in the kilts.
And I'll point out the drum major is a fellow submariner.
Can he fit into a submarine, Tony?
I think it's a long time since he was a weapons elector.
I love the young fellow there keeping pace with the drum major.
Yeah,
He's very studious, isn't he,
He
Scott?
is. Look at him studying.
Yes.
Left, right, left.
Yes, very good. In fact, he's in the uniform of the Australian Air League, and I have to say, Scott, my first experience in uniform was a 4 or 5-year-old World War II Australian Air League.
Is that right?
Yeah.
There we have the banner, John, of the 2 Squadron, originally established in Egypt during the First World War. It was reformed in 1937 and operated out of Darwin. And we're moving quickly on now to 24 Squadron, the first RAF squadron to engage the Japanese during the Pacific War when defending Rabaul. They were equipped only with 8 Wirraway trainers, but they met the attacking force of over 100 aircraft and were quickly reduced to 3 aircraft. Now we...
How poignant's that, John? We see that sign there, 24 Squadron, and the last one there, and he was waving away.
That's really good. Now we have 454 and 459 squadrons. It was one of the 17 Australian and manned squadrons of the Royal Air Force, and they were equipped with Baltimore's and flew maritime patrol missions. They're followed by 458 Squadron Association, Wellington Bombers, behind the wing torpedo, indicating the squadron's primary role was anti-shipping. And we've moved on now to 460 Squadron. This was the longest and largest serving of the Australian squadrons in Bomber Command, flying Lancasters that took part in all of the major campaigns over Europe and supported the D-Day landings in Normandy. In fact, the Australian War Memorial's Lancaster G for George is from 460 Squadron. Now we've moved on to the 3 airfield construction squadrons.
Sadly, the ranks of the Bomber Command guys have thinned remarkably since last year, John.
Yes, in fact, they are markedly reduced.
We spoke about some of the other school pipe and drum combination. Here's one now, very nicely turned out from Knox Grammar School, Warringah, on the North Shore, upper North Shore of Sydney. Not as large in numbers as the Scots College Band, but certainly as proficient. And it's a school which originally had a Presbyterian, or we shall say Scottish heritage. It's not surprising that their pipes and drums feature so well as their co-curricular activities.
But it's still a big band, John.
A big band. Interested to see some of them decorated with the national flag there attached to their drums. Obviously, the postie's been very diligent.
Yes, as Bob was saying earlier, the Australia Post posties have been out and about on their little bikes delivering the Australian flags, and the evidence of that flanks this route along Elizabeth Street. All those folks with their little Australian flags handed out by the posties.
And here we have Bomber Command.
Let's come back again. I'll have to sort of go back here a bit on my notes. Bomber Command was one of the most famous bomber squadrons in the Second World War. It's led today by Dr. Ron Horton. Bomber Command was a Royal Air Force unit responsible for bombing targets over Germany and enemy-controlled Europe. It remains one of the most potent strike forces in history, but it suffered terrible losses. 63% of all aircrew members were either killed or wounded, and almost 3,500 Australians lost their lives.
In fact, John, higher than any other unit in Australian Defence Force.
Yeah, that's true, John, yes. And now we have the banner of the Pathfinder Force. The history of the Pathfinder was that bombing was rather inaccurate from the normal bomber force, so a specialist group within Bomber Command was located to mark targets with flares, greatly increasing the accuracy in bombing. This was established in August 42, and the force gradually increased to 19 squadrons, and led by the Australian Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett, a former Point Cook graduate.
Just on screen was ex-flying officer Laurie Penn, who was recently awarded a Legion of Honour by the French government for flying missions with B-25s on D-Day.
Yeah, we have a member in Richmond branch of the RAF Association who was awarded the French Legion of Honour too. Now we have the Lancaster squadrons. Lancaster was a really great heavy bomber in those days. We're moving on now to Maritime Squadron banner, Catalina squadrons, known as the Black Cats, because they were painted black, flew at night, very effective. In fact, it was a Catalina that spotted the approaching Japanese fleet in the Coral Sea, giving the advance warning. Now we're seeing some support units. And we're moving on now to...
There's 28 Squadron Kitty Hawks there in the back too, John.
You can see that. Yep. A little bit out of order here.
There's Commonwealth Occupation Forces as well.
Kitty Hawk was a great fighter. It was... we didn't have Spitfires here until later in the war, but the Kitty Hawk was a great fighter at the time and was very good against the Zero.
That BCOF was the British Commonwealth Occupation Forces, which Australia was the largest contributor, and they were the ones who occupied Japan after the war.
Yep.
Australia had 3 battalions, 65th, 66th, 67th Battalion. It's also interesting to note that when Korea started, the Australian Army and the Air Force were the first units over there, even before the Americans got into Korea.
And of course, Kitty Hawk had a light bomber role as well, fighter bomber role too, John.
Yes.
Very effective.
We obviously have some veterans in a bus there.
This is, again, courtesy of the Taxi Council and the taxi owners. Great to have here. The Army don't have Land Rovers anymore. We had them for the last time on this march last year. And it's good to see there is an alternative, but no doubt about who that is. It is, in fact, the New South Wales Fire Brigade, as it used to be. Now, of course, Fire and Rescue.
And of course, the Drum Major's a long-serving member of the Defence Reserves by his medal set.
Well, the under stewardship today, Mr. Ma Ray, and one of the oldest members, in fact, is Mr. Vince Sedgwick. I served with Vince Sedgwick many years ago, and I've seen him play virtually every every instrument there is, from a triangle up to a trombone.
Glockenspiel?
No glockenspiel.
Goodness.
I don't know what the world's coming to. But as I say, Vince, I'll be 20 years ago since I served with Vince, and he was not a young man then.
But it is a tradition of a lot of our service organisations, the fire brigade, the ambulance, the police, to have their own bands. In fact, today on parade, led by Commissioner Paul Baxter, we can say happy birthday because today is the birthday of his appointment as Commissioner, which was yesterday.
Ah.
So one day, oh, congratulations, Mr. Commissioner.
One day in the job.
Yes, and he was the National Commander of the New Zealand Fire Service prior to being appointed as Commissioner here in New South Wales.
He leads today a group of men and women who are all ex-service members. This morning, a remembrance service and reflaying ceremony was held at the City of Sydney Fire Station in Castlereagh Street, commemorating 26 officers who were killed in action during World War I. This occurs every year. They have their own service at Castlereagh Street and have the reflaying services.
And right behind the band, coming into view now, is Vice Admiral Ian Knox, who's leading in excess of 5,000 veterans of current and former serving members. It's the largest Navy group to march on Anzac Day for many years. Admiral Knox spent 42 years in the Navy, and he was the CEO of Torrens, Hobart and Melbourne. And right behind, Petty Officer Mills carrying the banner on the left there, a long-serving veteran of DDGs, and yes, right there holding the banner with his Catholic skew as usual. Served on Canimbla, I believe, in the Second Gulf War. Admiral Knox was also Deputy Chief of Navy, Flag Officer commanding the Australian Fleet, and eventually Vice Chief of the Defence Force. And there's one of the DDGs HMAS Perth, read by Admiral Chris Oxenbow. And we've had 3 Australian warships named Perth. The first Perth was lost at Sunda, with half the crew lost at Sunda and another 100 died as prisoners of war of the Japanese. Possibly there's 3 survivors on parade today. There was a possibility. Or there's 3 alive. Gordon Steele, Frank McGovern and David Manning, all in their 90s. 2 who became POWs. The second Perth was a Charles F. Adams class destroyer built in the United States, served on the gun line in Vietnam and was awarded a US States Meritorious Commendation, the only Australian ship to get one. And a third Perth is an Anzac class frigate. And amongst the people marching today will be veterans of the third Perth.
A very good shot there of a very active Admiral Knox. There, Tony, just mentioned we've heard the pipes and drums there leading that contingent. It is the Southern Cross pipes and drums.
Jolly.
Tony, in regard to the Perth, you were talking about the first Perth and that dreadful battle in the Sunda Strait. If anyone wants to read, put the flesh and blood and the soul and the heart of that, I would recommend reading Ray Parkin's trilogy, wartime trilogy. Ray Parkin served on HMAS Perth, one of the great pieces of Australian literature, let alone Australian wartime literature.
And the books are Out of the Smoke, Into the Smother and The Sword and the Blossom. And yes, a great narrative. Another book by Catherine Sperling on Perth is very, very good. Moving on now, we've got HMAS Murchison, a river-class frigate which served, built during the end of the war and served in Korea with distinction. And the HMAS Anzac and Tobruk associations coming through as well. Anzac and Tobruk were built at the end of the war. And both ships led today by Commodore Les Bataki, who was the commissioning CEO of the third Anzac, the current HMAS Anzac. And they're moving through very quickly. Behind them we've got the Naval Association, Federation of Naval Ships by the look of it, and the Naval Association of Australia, followed by the Naval Reserve Association. Now, Naval Reserve Association are officers who have served predominantly in the reserves, many of them part-time sailors, and they fulfilled the jobs when needed, as needed.
Peter Collins.
And Peter Collins, former New South Wales parliamentarian,
and
there in the middle.
Of course, before that, ABC current affairs commentator, and I served with him in Sydney University Regiment prior to him joining the Navy. Great to see him here.
And marching the Naval Association was actually with them was Rear Admiral John Mead, who had served in command of in command of HMAS Parramatta.
And there's applause for the Parramatta, or for the Burwood rather, Girls High School Concert Band. The girls only started marching here, I think, if I'm right, 2 years ago. Since that time, their numbers have increased. They've changed their uniform. In fact, they've changed the option of the tunes that they play. Their program sounds good. They look good. Well done, the girls from Burwood High.
They are, Doug. And right behind them, you can see the banner of the Naval Warfare Officers Association, led by their president, Rear Admiral David Nipper Thomas, former Deputy Chief of Navy and Maritime Commander. Warfare officers command and fight warships, and the contingent comprises serving and retired naval officers who share the common experiences of conducting naval operations at sea. It includes the old Anti-Submarine Officers Association, formed in 1946. The association has developed a close association with HMAS Watson, which is the traditional home of naval warfare. As we can see there, Admiral Thomas on the left, and and probably Howard Furness on the right, marching next to Admiral Thomas. Yes. I had the pleasure of serving with Admiral Thomas at Fleet Headquarters. As you can see, these men and women marching today, they're the ones who lead the fight on the ships.
Quite a good turn-up of veterans amongst that group, Tony.
Most of our current crop of warfare officers have served. HMAS Yarra Association, again, we've had 4 generations of Yarra, from one of the foundation ships to the RAN, and it's led today by Ray Vidler. That doesn't look like Ray Vidler there, but 4 from Foundation Torpedo Boat Destroyer through the sloop in the Second World War that was lost shortly after Perth. The third Yarra was a destroyer escort, and the current Yarra is a mine hunter. And I'd say many of the men marching there in uniform are from the 3rd Yarra. The communications branch, led by Alan Shorty Moffat, who joined in 55 and served in Anzac in a malaria emergency. The communicators have been marching separately since 1947, and they're now a combination of a number of different groups. The Rands, what would we have done without the Rands in the Second World War and post-war? Many of these ladies marching today were of the old Rands who joined up when they weren't allowed to go to sea, and many of them made that transition and then served at sea on our current ships, and they're proudly marching with their forebearers. And as you can see, most of the ladies in the back there have got a good rack of medals. You can see a bosun mate and a number of naval writers, a coxswain in the background there. They're all, and of course many of the ladies earlier wanted to go to sea but weren't allowed to go to sea. Unfortunately, that has changed.
And the band coming into view there is from west of Sydney. It's the Hawkes Street District Concert Band, another one of the band which is regularly here at our Anzac Day March. And I have to repeat the comment that I made a little earlier. We're very, very pleased to have such support from our band community around the city, in the adults as well as the school bands, and they really assist to make the march a very significant occasion. We'd like more. So if there's any bands out there who don't have aims to...
Premier Group on parade here today. John, is Jeff Anderson leading the Submariners Association. Of course, we got submarines in 1914. And we've had a lot. Gus Gillies there on the left, whose father served with 466 Squadron, John. Immediately behind him, Kev Hayton, who was a TI with me. Current submarines of the Collins class, one of the best submarines in the world, and they're now proudly showing all the submarines on the Skull and Crossbones, which was traditionally flown on the end of a successful patrol. And many of the men that are on view now, I've actually served at sea with. Michael Lynch on the left there. Our current submarines are out there doing the business. They had problems in the early days, but they're now amongst the best submarines in the world. I was proud to be a member of them. The Merchant Navy, led by Richard Sandeman Gray, Chief Warden of the Master of Mariners. And I was actually a member of the Mariners Association in Tasmania. They marched under several national flags. Merchant Navy ships sailed everywhere. Maritime trade operations. A little known reservist, the only completely reserve unit. These men and women monitor the merchant shipping all over the world and all over Australia, and we've had MTO officers serving in the Middle East, embedded with coalition forces, tracking shipping movements and collecting intelligence.
Yes, the US Army small ships, mate. Small
ships. These guys, men were either underage or overage, and they manned the ships that took the supplies up through the islands, and for many, many years they weren't recognised for their service because they were paid by the Americans, and the Australian government just blithely forgot about them. And they fought a long fight to get recognition for their service. And some were only 15 and 16 when they went off to serve.
And some of them turned in RAN uniform, and they still weren't recognised.